In this video, we're going to look at where the hippocampus is. Here you can see that the hippocampus is at in the middle of the brain. What I want you to imagine is you have these big cerebral cortices, and underneath, roughly where the hippocampus is, they kind of tuck in underneath like that. So you've got the cerebral cortex going around, goes around, then tucks in, and basically the hippocampus will be formed by my fingertips just there. So we can have a look at this amazing 3D model, which you can find if you go on the web to brainfacts.org. So here's our brain, which we can move around. You can see these cerebral cortices. And if we look up underneath, I want you to imagine in the temporal lobe here, where it starts to tuck in underneath the brain. If we now have a closer look at that, we can actually look up here and call up hippocampus. And it'll take us to the structures, which, as you can see, if you can imagine that you can just about see where the cerebral cortex comes around and curls around and then kind of tucks itself back under again. So that's where the hippocampus actually is. Let's have a close look now at the structure of it. So as we do that, try to bear in mind this kind of tooth-like shape here, where it kind of comes around and curls back in on itself. Now if we look at a slightly different way of looking at it, here we've got so let me just try and make that picture a bit bigger for you. So this is that kind of curled in structure that you talked about. So this is now expanded that, and you also notice that kind of a bit like a toenail on the end. You've got this thing called the dentate gyrus. So this is more or less what it looks like. There are some other ways of viewing it too. So some structures to point out then. We've got the entorhinal cortex here. Remember these things, entorhinal cortex. And then within the hippocampus proper is divided up into different regions. The most important ones for our purposes are CA1 and CA3. So those are the important things to be aware of then. Entorhinal cortex, CA1, CA3, and dental gyrus. Try to keep this structure in your mind. So here's another drawing of the same sort of idea, but we're beginning to take our focus out again now. I pointed out CA1 and CA3. So this is that kind of claw-like structure of the hippocampus itself. And here's the dentate gyrus, which is a bit like a fingernail. Actually, it's called dentate gyrus because it looks like a tooth, so I'll call it a tooth from now on. Stepping further back, we've got the subiculum, and then before that, the parahippocampal gyrus, of which the entorhinal cortex is part of that. So this is the cerebral cortex here, and what's happening is it is curling around. Then you've got the entorhinal cortex, you've got the subiculum, and then CA1, 2, 3, and 4, and then the dentate gyrus. Let's have a look at that in our 3D brain again. I'll just make this bigger for you. So do please go and have a look at this site, brainfacts.org. So we're looking at this is the hippocampus, the entorhinal cortex, So let's find the subiculum first. The subiculum is the bit next to it. So the subiculum feeds straight into the hippocampus proper, and then the dentate gyrus is the tooth or the fingernail type thing underneath it. So what I recommend you do is to have a look at these different ways of representing the hippocampus and get a good model in your head of how these things actually work together. So you end up with a good 3D model in your mind, so that then you can understand all the descriptions of the circuitry and so on.